Hello, this is Geotech Land. Let's take a look at what is new in the world of tech. AMD reveals their Ryzen 5000G series desktop APUs and their Fidelity FX Super Resolution. So recently at Computex 2021, we've heard some really interesting announcements from AMD and Nvidia. Starting with the AMD side, they announced their next-gen mobile Ryzen APUs, and they announced something called Fidelity FX, which is very similar to Nvidia's DLSS. It uses some techniques to improve picture quality. It's almost like it emulates or simulates a higher resolution. Of course, it doesn't look as good as the actual, let's say, targeted 4K resolution as an example, but it looks a lot closer and just a lot nicer than it normally would look. In addition, AMD announced their upcoming 3D chiplet technology, and to summarize, they're making some architecture changes on their CPUs that should increase performance significantly, almost as if they were introducing a completely new architecture. So those are some very exciting developments for AMD. When it comes to the GPU side, AMDs are my personal favorite because they work so well with the open source Linux Mesa drivers. And so they work very well for gaming on Linux. And speaking of gaming on Linux, Nvidia announced that DLSS is coming to Proton, and they announced 2 additional GPUs. That is the RTX 3080 Ti and GeForce RTX 3070 Ti. While it is nice that they're releasing newer GPUs that look to offer better value and better performance, still unclear whether we'll be able to actually buy these GPUs, especially at MSRP, before some scalpers can get their hands on them. But the most exciting thing here is that Nvidia is showing love to Steam's Proton. For those of you that don't know yet, Steam Play's Proton allows you to play Windows games on Linux right out of the box. And to see Nvidia showing support for that is a very good sign. It just goes to show that other companies are taking Proton seriously and thus taking gaming on Linux seriously. Even though Nvidia doesn't show that much love to the open source Mesa drivers, a lot of people that game on Linux do use Nvidia GPUs because they generally do offer better performance. And so this is all very good news. And speaking of gaming on Linux and Steam, Valve is secretly building a Switch-esque like portable gaming PC. So a reporter from Ars Technica claims to have multiple sources alleging that Valve has been working on such a device, and it appears they'll be calling it SteamPal or Neptune, according to some recent code dumps collected by SteamDB. The Valve CEO and founder also teased at some upcoming announcements regarding Steams and consoles earlier this month in a video. I do wonder what kind of games will actually be running here. I even suspect that they may have a sort of Netflix-like Steam Cloud gaming. That way you can maybe play some AAA games on this device, at least through the cloud. So all very interesting and very exciting news there. If you're enjoying my content, you can subscribe to me on YouTube, PeerTube, and you can follow me on Odyssey. You can also support me on LiberaPay, Patreon, and by shopping at Earth Hero. See links in the description below. In other Linux and open source news, Chrome OS's Linux app support is leaving beta. 3 years ago, Chrome OS announced official support for supporting Linux apps, and it's been in beta since. A part of me does appreciate this, that you can now start running popular Linux apps on Chrome OS, but the pessimist in me thinks that all this might be doing is making Linux irrelevant, because I think what Microsoft and Google are trying to do is get developers away from other, independent Linux distros and sort of incentivize them to use Linux on Windows, because maybe they're hoping that instead of running Windows and Linux, you can just run Windows and then play around with Linux through their Windows subsystem for Linux. And then here we have Chrome OS saying the same thing. It's like, hey, why install another Linux distro when you can run Chrome OS, use all the apps that you want to use there, and then also load other popular Linux apps. So again, I have kind of mixed feelings about this news, and I think we should definitely just proceed with caution here. OBS Studio 27.0 has been released with undo/redo and Wayland Support. I definitely use OBS a lot. I'm actually using OBS to record this right now. And while I did update my OBS Studio to the most recent release through FlatHub, I actually have not been able to successfully get screen capture working on Wayland, even though it looks like Pop! OS does support Wayland. So there might still be some things to iron out there. But otherwise, this is very exciting because as soon as this thing starts working properly, I'll finally be able to ditch Xorg and start using Wayland by default. And so I'm very happy that OBS is supporting Wayland. But I'm hoping to get that working just so I can test if there's any difference between Wayland and Xorg. But anywho, the undo redo support is nice, and support for source transitions, browser dock support, and service integration for Linux, and support for sRGB color formats sounds very good as well. Of course, you can read more details on their official release through GitHub. The GIMP fork Glimpse has been put on pause. No more updates are being planned. So if you don't know what Glimpse is basically a fork of GIMP, and a big key change that they wanted to make is with the branding. They wanted to take the code of GIMP and give it a better name, a better branding, because they felt that the name GIMP might put businesses off. And I know a lot of people in the community didn't like that because they're thinking, hey, you're just taking this code that the GIMP developers have been working very hard for and just slapping a different name on it and calling it yours. But I honestly don't see anything wrong with that, especially if they're contributing upstream to the GIMP project and they're making it known that this is a fork of GIMP. I'm actually a big believer in better branding for Linux and open source applications. I think that's a good thing because ultimately we have to compete against applications that are built by for-profit companies, and I think having better branding will give us a better edge. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to convince people to use the app, and better marketing and branding is a tool we can use to further that goal. Now, a big reason why the Glimpse project has been put on hiatus is that there was not a lot of people contributing to the project. They were actually very well funded, and a lot of the funding that they had left over, they're sending that over to the GIMP team. But they just didn't really have a lot of people sort of managing the project. There was only like maybe a handful of people, moving forward with things, and just the developers that were making contributions didn't have enough time to carry the project forward, which is sad because I really like this project. I've actually been using Glimpse as my main photo editing app. So if you like the idea of Glimpse and better branding for Linux apps, definitely check them out and see if you could contribute in any way. And maybe we could persuade the developers to pick it up again. System76 has officially released their first mechanical keyboard. So System76 released a keyboard that offers tons of customizability. You can configure this keyboard in any way you want, swap the keys out, very plug and play. While this keyboard looks very nice, it does seem a little bit smaller than I expected, and it is priced at $285, which is a lot, but you do have to consider that, again, System76 is a small company. Their products are made in the USA, so you are supporting US workers when you purchase this. And not only that, but the PCB and hardware design of this keyboard is open source, so anyone can take the code and build a similar keyboard. And of course, if enough people buy the keyboard and support System76, they'll be able to scale this up and possibly lower the price sometime in the future. Otherwise, it's a very nice design, and who knows, maybe in the future I may get my hands on it as well. Speaking of more Linux hardware, Tuxedo has recently released a Linux laptop, and it has tons of screen space. Especially with high-end laptops, I feel like that's going to be the trend. I know Apple is planning on releasing their own sort of all-screen MacBook Pros in the near future, so it's good that we have high-end options with Linux laptops here. Not just Tuxedo, but System76 also released a 15-inch that does offer quite a lot of screen space. And it's good to see that Tuxedo Computers also has an option here. This laptop is a 14-inch laptop, and it comes with various options. The base model starts at £1,249. And they also do have a 3K resolution model with an Intel i7 processor, 16GB of RAM, and a 500GB SSD. Otherwise, it's always nice to see more Linux hardware support. You have reached the end of this episode. If you like this content, Tune in next week for some more awesome tech news.